Welcome to Stevens Point, Wisconsin. My name's Ben McDougal and I'm here with the UW Stevens Point campus. Hey, we're about to walk into an experience with students talking about how to make a ruckus on the timeline of now with no permission required. Keep building, my friends.
So there's kind of a coffee theme here if you're following the conversation. Definitely, that's why I figured coffee mug was a perfect gift for him today. So with that, he's spent time here in Stevens Point. He's got to meet some of our local entrepreneurs already, and I know he's very excited to meet all of you today. So let's give a warm Stevens Point welcome to Ben McDougal.
Thank you for being here, everyone. Elizabeth, thank you for hosting and the generosity of allowing me to share some time with this remarkable group. Boy, I don't think there's much more to say. Based off the introduction, we've got things taken care of. So enjoy the book, and we'll talk. No, I'm just kidding. Today we're going to have some fun. I mean, the entrepreneurial lifestyle is one of the quickest and most accessible paths towards career nirvana. We'll talk about getting there throughout our time together with some entrepreneurship, some side hustle, and also, of course, entrepreneurship. But I think we all have supercomputers in our pocket. I've got some fun idea books. I think it's like page 21 in the first chapter. But there's an exercise of like creating an idea machine out of yourself, writing 5 new ideas down every day. We'll look at it in a moment. But I've got these to give away. So all you have to do is throw a hashtag UWSP onto whatever social media platform you got. Hold up your phone to signal that you've taken the photo and shared that with some friends. We'll connect all together here throughout this evening, and I'll be Vanna White and just throw these around. Got enough for everyone if we get pretty active as a group. Throughout the slide deck, you'll notice some QR codes. Hopefully in the back, they're easy to still scan, and they'll bring you to a variety of places. And so let's get started. So I think there's probably a good place to start is where I was when I was in your seat. Who here knows what they want to do in the next 2 to 10 years? All right, so everyone who's raised their hand, please talk to me afterwards. I want to connect dots to make that a reality. But I promise that's a minority. There are more people who are not quite sure what's next. And I think I was in that same position. As Dr. Martin shared, like the opportunity with a computer science degree to go into the video game industry, I assumed I had to build video games. That was the one path in. And so this is not what I ended up doing. I would have had to have 4 jobs to live in Southern California. Found web development was another interesting path and went this direction. That was kind of my first full-time job after that college experience. And so this is something I think I want to make sure that is understood, is there are opportunities to do more than one thing. The diversified career portfolio, through the efficiency of our connected era, paired with the supercomputers that we all have access to, allow you to focus and actually achieve pretty great things without diluting yourself to mediocrity. And so my first move was, as Elizabeth mentioned, I activated this soccer tournament. This was kind of a result of seeing how the internet was so powerful. This was when Google was about 3 years old, right? So let's rewind 20 years. Like SEO was hard and online registration was like magic. And so by building a website and pairing it with something I had done my whole life, it was an interesting path into entrepreneurship, almost unknowingly. As we continued to build, and thankfully, looking back, it was almost entrepreneurial, helping so many business owners pretty much build the first website for their company, right? So telling their story, learning how they were doing their thing. And so as the internet continued to evolve, like MySpace became cool. And so we built a social network for video gamers, and remember that interest that I originally had? No one told me there are side doors. entrepreneurship and community building are side doors into the industries that you might be interested in. And so we built a gathering of gamers.com way back in the day. We activated live video game events throughout North America. Like Guitar Hero was good to us, you know? And so it really unlocked like the ability to build something using technology and going beyond what I thought was possible as an individual. And so I want to take a couple pit stops throughout this storytelling and take a moment to realize the value of building your engaged network before you need it. We're going to talk about a couple of myths and a couple of realities. I think it's not uncommon for students to arrive in a community networking event, maybe it's a chamber gathering, maybe it's 1 million cups, whatever it might be, and feel like there's not a whole lot to contribute. Boo! That's not true. What are you interested in? How do you spend time? What are some of the skills that you feel like are unique? You understand what's happening on the frontiers of now. Asking thoughtful questions. These are ways that you can activate some really interesting conversation, and I promise community members that see such initiative are going to be really quick to learn more about what you're up to, what you hope to do, and while it might not be that first degree of connectivity, it's often that second and third degree. And so building that engaged network is something that I guarantee you can start doing now. But yes, it requires initiative, following up, standing out while you're in that environment. And I know that it's challenging because time and attention are scarce. So I was in web development for 8 years, had some neat entrepreneurial experiences, and decided to continue building. This is that electronic beer flight paddle. Hanging out on a Sunday fun day and asking which beer is which. And so we went down a rabbit hole with electronic engineering, had 3 founders in this quest. And on the touch screen, you can highlight each of the beers, click on them, see what more details about each item, share a few favorites, and the industry generates data from this. We built the team, the IP, the branding to transcend beer. And so while this was our first embodiment, everything was brewed in order to go into cheese or into wine or different types of industries. Imagine a charcuterie board, right, with the touch screen highlighting which one is which. And so that's Flightbright. It really is a neat story that continues to churn through the Beer Festival app. It's a good story of pivoting, maybe for another time. But after retiring out of web development, this is an interesting thing. Building a role that's not on your resume, right? The job on Indeed, yes, exists. But I guarantee if there's an industry you care about, you can turn a knob of innovation and find a role that is actually probably more interesting to you and maybe even more innovative and needed for the company. And so I went in-house at a home builder, and I don't even like the word hammer. So this is the 4th path into construction, right? It's using that creative capability, multimedia marketing with photography and video and, of course, web development and social media and traditional marketing outlets. And being able to tell the story, build the brand to match the quality of homes that this progressive business owner had been building for a long time. So it was really neat to be able to go into these beautiful homes and create art, listening to EDM alone most of the time, and really having that start to finish, from taking the photo to releasing it and sharing it within a story. And so I'm thankful. This was also the moment where I left sales. It's an interesting thing when you lose the agenda. Like, hey, does she need a website? Does she need a website? Does she need a website? And now I'm just like, tell me a story. And so when I left that position, it allowed me to really get curious. It alleviated some of my personal bandwidth to pursue more community activity. Look, I mentioned getting involved, and I had already done that, but this was a transition into leadership and generosity, right? Volunteering for 5 years in the 1 Million Cups community for Des Moines allowed me to raise my hand later and give the chance to build another new role to help connect nationwide. And so this is another key takeaway. I think of the value of course, building your engaged network, but along the way, my biggest key takeaway, I have had coffee every Wednesday for over 10 years. And there's a reason I'm weird. The energy of accelerating others is unmatched. And that can be as simple as making an introduction or listening attentively, asking a thoughtful question. It doesn't have to be financial capital invested or this huge commitment for a life coach along the way. You can make small adjustments to the way that you interact with others to make them feel heard, to give them a song of significance, and along the way, continue to connect those dots as you accelerate others. This is unmatched, and it's interesting. A lot of people talk about the value of authenticity. I think that's a trap. Most people in business want consistency. And the easiest way to be authentic is to remain consistent. I don't have to tell you this show. I'm not up here pretending to be something I'm not. And through that consistency, paired with a little generosity along the way, it builds trust that caffeinates whatever you care about. And so this is a diversified career portfolio state of now. It's funny, like, what do you do? That's a scary question to be asked, and I would challenge you to go deeper than this. But if you list them all off, it sounds like I've diluted myself to mediocrity. But I promise, there's efficiency that is aligned through me. And so the 1 Million Cups role expanded, being able to support like 60 different communities in rural, medium, and large communities. Being able to see how entrepreneurship works at students in those stages of your life, and as people continue to evolve through their own journey. Of course, the book has generated so much peace. I'm thankful for the generosity of the business school here for covering those for you. It's not me selling my book, it's extending the impact of our time together. So know that I'm not going anywhere. I'll stick around, of course. I'm going to sign some of these books, personalize them as well. But what an interesting quest. If you've ever thought about writing a book, happy to chat about that experience. It took 1.25 years. And so if it starts to keep you up at night, this might generate the resiliency you need to pursue something that I think you might be proud of for life. Continuing on, Flightright we've talked about, Open, we'll skip through some of these other activities, the podcast, thinking of side hustles not as a project, not as this big lift, but as a creative season. Something that you can explore, tinker with, experiment, and not feel the weight of needing it to be perfect in order to pursue some form of what you have in mind. And then this is just nerdy.com. So BenBot is, I wrote every week for 3 years and used all these writings in Roasted Reflections to create influence layers on top of Chat UX. And so everyone's talking AI, ChatGPT, OpenAI, right? This is their API, so it answers anything. But if you talk to it about things I've written about, the Benergy like flows into the replies. And so you have to have an NFT in order to access the channel where BenBot lives, thinking there might be something to commercialize as making a no-code option for content creators to have a fresh interaction with their audience through these AI interactions. And so I've talked a little bit about the book journey. This is something that's very special to me. The hardback is like on its way to complete the sequence. Published 3 years ago, and really has been something I'm thankful for. These are the chapters that you'll read through, and as we all know, the path is not the same for anyone. But these are some common elements of the entrepreneurial lifestyle. And so my hope is that the evergreen content will generate insights and just little jolts along the way. And why it's titled this is you don't need books, you need action, right? This is how progress is made, how things are learned. And so while you can learn all the frameworks, doing is the best way to make things done. All right. So I mentioned some of the categories, some of the areas of conversation today, but before we jam on those things, I thought it'd be fun to roll through a couple of myths, a couple realities. I'm sure you know most of these. I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's important to double click on the idea that you have nothing to contribute. A lot of the conversations that we've had amongst ecosystem allies the last 24 hours have been around blurring the line between classroom and community. Show up to these events, get excited about it, forget the extra credit. Yeah, it's a bonus, but you're there for yourself. And if that starts to churn, it might be something where it creates awareness that, ooh, I'm not that interested in such activity. Great. A good early no is a lot better than a long, wrong yes. And so being able to see how people are building into the directions of their ideas and learning the realities of what it takes to, basically play 80 hours so that you don't have to work 40. Being around peers is part of the game. That's why community is chapter 2. This is a lonely roller coaster, but being around others helps nourish that entrepreneurial, that innovative spirit. And so I wanted to just double click on you have little to contribute. You can do a lot as a lone wolf. Yes, teams create exponential capability, but I promise you can get started and you can find more people that might want to join that experience along the way. You can read, let's move on. Reality, right? Initiative. If you show up, ask a couple of questions, explain your areas of interest, you will have that community hug that I mentioned earlier. Initiative is scarce. And so when you see it, I know that I'm just like, I want to help however I can. Right? Most humans learn, earn, and then give back. And so you'll be interacting with people that have an engaged network that can expand your connectivity. And maybe there's an opportunity for you to lead. Right? Don't be afraid to take that initiative, ask that question, and pursue some of these opportunities before you get the piece of paper, right? Let's build now. There's no permission required. Community counts is in that regard, and I think persistence is the wild card. And so you'll see someone, sharing an idea. Oh, that's questionable, might not work, but let's see. 6 months later, they come back and present their refill at 1 million cups, and things are growing. They've got some early adopt persistence. And so winners quit all the time, but they know when and what to quit. And so moving through dips and allowing yourself to lean into that persistent, it will get you farther than the person who quit before you. This is a quick scan. I'm going to ask everyone just to jam on it real quick. This is something that I've learned in talking with educators, with leaders, with founders, with investors. The future of work is a conversation that a lot of people like to talk about. And so while conversation is healthy, and I appreciate those collisions, it might not be that complicated. If you have curiosity that is in addition with the initiative that we're talking about, and then all of a sudden you activate the real skills that this took you to, this is an encyclopedia of things I would encourage you to go down and check off the list. Be honest with yourself. Is this something that is my superpower? Sweet, let's keep building. Is this an area that I could improve upon? Okay. Is this something I'm not interested in? Perhaps the team member that I'm pursuing or looking, kind of keeping on my radar, needs to be good at this real skill. And then, of course, vocational knowledge, right? If I'm going to be a plumber, I need to know how to do the plumbing. But that's a prerequisite, right? So get past that factor. It's a requirement, and lean into these real skills that I promise will translate into a lot of attention when it's you talking at an interview, you leading a talk like I am today, you telling the story of a company you really care about. And so I'm excited for you to experience and take a peek at that encyclopedia from Seth Godin. I should, of course, mention my favorite thinker. Look on the back of your books, the Lifetime Achievement Award. Interacting with your hero, that's another conversation. But to have Seth Godin woven into my narrative, I felt compelled to tell him, thank you. Through gratitude, I want to just let you know you've changed my life more than anyone else. And so those real skills are something that is out of his latest book called The Song of Significance. There's that hashtag. If you haven't taken your photo yet, here's your self. Actually, let's do the awkward thing. Hey, photos are awkward, but everyone likes having them. Quick selfie. If you take your phone out, I'll give you a second. I'll do this for a second. Ready? Ready? Yeah. Here we go. All right, so we got content. Now how are you going to tell your story? Here's a chance for you to connect. Raise your phone up if you've done something like this, and we'll just start throwing these idea books out to celebrate your initiative. All right, so we're going to talk about entrepreneurship first. One of the slide deck design tips for you is if you put too much words on a slide, you either give the audience a chance to listen or read. And so I'm just going to take a second. Fun way to think about going in and just making a ruckus. People will fear you, but they need you. And so getting excited about being innovative within an existing company. Look, there's a lot of benefits in having a paid full-time salary. It allows you to do other things with the financial capital that is connected there, and making sure you're transparent with your interests and your other side hustles during that interview process will avoid the weight of secrecy. And so you can be building other things that might not have financial capital, but deliver different types of energy and make that full-time job more interesting. And so entrepreneurs are a beautiful thing. Of course, we've been talking a lot about showing up and the initiative required, understanding the tribe. I think active listening is the biggest key takeaway from here. When you join a team, there's value in without letting the past define what the future might be, understanding that the past did generate some form of success and got the company to where we're at right now. And so active listening gives you a chance to kind of respect the current environment and along the way take some notes. Ooh, that's interesting. I'd do it differently. This is interesting. Maybe there's a chance to explore some fresh ideas through this. And over time, each time you kind of make a promise and keep that promise, that leash is extended for you to continue making that progress within the company. And you'll gain trust each time you're generous through that action. Let's see, I just nailed all of them pretty much. So being a linchpin, right? Are you indispensable? What happens if you're gone? I promise, I know it's kind of dark, but the promise of a full-time role is one decision away from being taken away. And so how are you going to build your personal brand to transcend something that might be important, but that might also evolve? How can you build community in a way that if something does happen unexpectedly, you've got other things rolling alongside? Without, of course, diluting yourself to mediocrity. There's value in understanding your personal bandwidth and keeping an eye on that. I do that exercise, the pie chart, every year, just to kind of identify where I'm spending my time, and it's healthy. The more things you add into the mix to avoid such distraction. These are some of the books. I mentioned Song of Significance. I mentioned my appreciation for all things Seth Godin. And when it comes to entrepreneurship, these are some reads. You'll find all of them except for the far right over in the resource section on the back of that book. And so what a beautiful way to continue. And I'll just kind of double click here on the Icarus Deception. If I'm in your seat right now, my book's cool, that book is cool too. This book is something that will inspire you to continue creating art and shipping it to those you seek to serve. In fact, Seth Godin says it's not even art until you ship it. So when you're journaling, yes, that's healthy. Yes, that's a release. Yes, you're improving your writing. But what about the blog? Quit being selfish. Share that stuff with the world. Connect with others who share those types of thoughts, and you'll feel that fear starting to fade away the more you do it. So entrepreneurship, super valuable. And once again, it's such a safe bet, the innovative spirit here in this stage of your life. Side hustles, right? This is something, who here is building something that's making money? Nice. What are you all other people waiting for? I'm kind of joking, but I'm also kind of encouraging you to consider your passions. What are some of the things that you're interested in? I mean, My path is, I built companies in soccer, craft beer, video games, nice houses, and technology. So while it's interesting how commercializing an idea can sometimes kill your hobby, think about ways that you can come in the side door as you're exploring some of the things that you already do. And in this moment, maybe go beyond the activities of your current experience. A lot of times when you work with high schoolers, there are like a lot of similar concepts. And the challenge, through customer discovery, this can be achieved. The challenge is to do non-teenager activities and think about businesses that can transcend the project of such a class. And so I like calling them quests, the seasons of creative activity. Side hustles are a beautiful thing, and because there's lower risk, oftentimes this is the path into entrepreneurship. When you're exploring these side hustles, it's important to, of course, stay balanced, as we talked about with the personal bandwidth. The transparency is key as well. So when you're talking with, that employer who's interested in other things you're, doing, don't be afraid to explain that I love going to vintage environments, finding some gear. I've loved to wear it myself, customize it, add some electronics to it, and once in a while I built the website to sell online as well. Ding! Initiative, right? And so allowing yourself to celebrate some of those activities early on will, like I said, avoid the heaviness of secrecy. Leaning into the pain, this is a good point. So it's easy to build something that you think is cool, that your parents think is cool, that your friends think is cool. And it might be cool, but are people willing to pay for it? You've heard this before. Customer discovery is the best way to decide. The more data you collect through feedback, the better decision making you can have. And so as you're building something, lean into the pain. When you're talking to someone in a customer discovery environment, what's the worst part about your day? What's the thing that you hate? Like, what is the worst? Where is your pain? And maybe there's ways that I can come at it through the idea maze and generate something that's valuable. Don't rush, we'll talk about that later. Delivering on the promise can be challenging when you're diversified. Make sure that you can deliver the product on time as scheduled, or the event, or whatever it might be. And then being able to know that the community can be leveraged to go beyond yourself. And we've all heard the cliche thing, like, are you going to regret doing it or not trying? And so I'd encourage you to tinker. I would encourage you to get excited about it and recognize that these are some of the characteristics that will help you build efficiently and that you can avoid the headline trap. Most of us are excited when we see, wow, that founder raised $1 billion, and this is interesting, but it can create some form of a barrier where it doesn't feel like I can do such a thing. Or I'm, selling something, I'm doing some early moves, I've got an interesting team that's coming together, but I'm not an entrepreneur. Promise, you are, and embrace that activity. Community, stay balanced, be realistic. You can't boil the ocean if you're unable to warm up a cup of coffee. And so know your resources, be honest with that, but stay ambitious, of course. All right. I love this, my friends. But I also go fast. And so if there's anything that we should stop and jam on a little bit, this is a chance. Any quick questions? I like to make it interactive. I know that wasn't planned or expected, so let's keep moving. This is that exercise I talked about. Who has got that photo? Let's get some of these out of here. All right. There we go. Nice. I'll go get some more and keep it rolling. This is an interesting exercise that is hard to maintain, but very easy to start. It's kind of like going to the gym after the New Year's resolution, But it also is valuable even if it's something that gets sat on the shelf. If you think about and write physically, I know we got phones, of course. Who else? Yeah. Here we go. if you physically write down these ideas every day, it's interesting how your mind starts to flex. And you start to think about like problems to solve or things that might be able to be done better. And even if it's not something that you build upon now, it's something that can either A, be done perhaps in the future or be given away. Idea machines can be generous in the way that they're thinking about ideas. And, Kevin is talking about this and I have this idea I must share. And so the idea machine can not only be interesting for yourself, but be generous along the way. And so this is a cool exercise. I've got more for folks who want to come up afterwards, share a little bit about what you're thinking about. And it's a nice little gift. The NFT on the front's nice and nerdy, and you'll recognize the coffee shop on the back that matches the back of the book. This is a new slide. I've done this talk around the country, but I do want to add something fresh from the Balaji book that just came out. I thought it was interesting as we think about the idea that you have. There are 8 billion people on the world, on the globe, on our earth. And so I struggle to think your idea is unique. Now, are you able to execute? No one cares about your great ideas. They care about how you make things happen. But as you consider that idea, I challenge you to recognize that there's likely a line going into such an idea. Think of that door and how long it might be to go into this concept that might have an industry full of similar concepts. Pull away, pretend you're that drone, and look at the idea maze. Let's use a video game analogy, right? Like, how do I get the power up? Maybe it's a technology, maybe it's a team member, maybe it's that early adopter, or something that really is going to take me to the other area of the maze. Where do ideas die? Where are things not finally making it through? And lastly, this is hard to do. Instead of hoping it doesn't exist, try to find it. Who has this name? Who has this concept? Who has this technology? What does the patent office suggest? What does the trademark, existing applications say? And has anyone made it through this maze in the way that I think about? It'll really help you zoom away and come at it from fresh angles. The differentiation that Evan, for instance, and I were talking about, adding phygital elements with an NFC chip into clothing, all of a sudden, it's got story with digital depth and connects to the audience that creates this collectability vibe through the Web3 environment. These are some of the ways that you can activate these side doors as you really are honest with that idea maze. All right, so you've got this idea. The side hustle starts to grow in your career portfolio, and all of a sudden you start, having a team. Maybe you're hiring a few folks. This thing is how you're spending your time. And so the entrepreneurial lifestyle, I'll talk about in a second, so I won't jump to that. But what a treat to be able to build into directions that you care about. But I promise action is required. It's like the prerequisite. And so some of the things that I think are important when it comes to building things that matter, that are generating different types of capital. Yes, financial capital is important, but there is network capital and human capital and institutional capital and all 7 of the capitals that you can use. Even if you don't have some of them, use what you have through abundance to attract more of what you want. Being able to show up, stand out, follow up, this is the same throughout all 3, as you might notice. Knowing that the storytelling is important, marketing is a lot of being able to deliver on a promise. Knowing that you can ask for help, recognizing some of your superpowers, but in contrast, areas that you can improve, or the type of person that you really need. Might not be a buddy, might not be a friend in school, might be a community member, might be someone at a different school, might be someone online. That's an important thing. It's like dating. Don't rush into a bad idea. And very tactical, if it's 2 people, it doesn't mean that it's a 50-50 equity split. Maybe there's a pool of equity that is vested over time and earned between the people, knowing that every story ends. It just might end differently. And having some of the hard conversations up front are easier when there's less tension that might have accumulated over time. Knowing the numbers, I think this is an interesting one. Look, your financial modeling is never going to be right, and investors know that. But if you can use that to simulate different scenarios, it shows that you're interested in making money beyond the passionate, heartfelt thoughts that were your why. And so when an investor understands that you are, of course, not correct, but you understand how to turn these knobs, you know the way the numbers work, it shows a level of sophistication and a shared interest in turning their money into more money. That is why understanding the numbers is important when you think about your business and financial modeling. We've talked about building a team, telling stories, aligning a remarkable brand. I hope those things resonate. I'm sure most of you understand a lot of these elements, but it's good to hear from a peer. One of the things that allows us to do more with less is community. We have so many people around us. I mean, even in this room, give us a weekend, a startup weekend, and I promise we're coming up with something super interesting. Imagine the second, third degree network that this small group represents, paired with the real skills that everyone brings into the mix. You start colliding with folks in a consistent way, and it's interesting to see how that generosity of time starts to allow you to do more with less through this consistency, through this positive sum mindset of if you win, we win. Being like that over time builds that trust that allows you to really do some cool things beyond what you might do alone. And I know that we're not going to talk about entrepreneurial ecosystem building in depth, but this is a good way to visualize what a lot of different entrepreneurial ecosystems are looking like. Who here has heard of entrepreneurial ecosystem building? Right. So this is an interesting career path. If you like connecting dots, if you start to enjoy, the community environment, showing up at networking events, there's a balance between doing it for growth and actually entertaining yourself. But the ability to be like a spider who's weaving and growing the web while tightening it along the way and adding things and feeling the rotation or the movement over here and being able to recognize there could be opportunity. This is an analogy for the type of person that can be very valuable at an economic development level, in government. The art of connection can be your career path. And the work of an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder is really creating all these dots. And so I thought I'd create a little awareness around that because it isn't something that is as well known, but it does exist. And you see even large companies thinking about culture, recognizing the opportunity to create significance amongst their team. There's a culture leader, right? This is entrepreneurial ecosystem building inside of existing companies. So that art of connection is highly valuable. I know it's a little small, but you'll notice it's a graphic in the book, so it's not something that you need to squint too hard at. But these are the 7 capitals that are described in the startup community way. And you'll notice that the entrepreneurs remain at the center. Things get misguided, go off the rails, and become perhaps self-serving when the entrepreneur is not at the center. And so whether that's a small business looking to make a ruckus at a local level, maybe it's a scalable business where you're using technology to expand the impact beyond your local environment, or perhaps it's like the franchise model that is local business translated into a startup. These are different capitals that you can use to really lean into what you have to attract more of what you want. And areas that you might find some of that growth exist all around you. And so you're literally in a sandbox that wants you to succeed. And so leverage that. Go to the pitch competition. Take the $5,000. This isn't going to be available to you forever. And so leverage all the resources you have that are not hard to find. They make it easy to find, but it takes that initiative to activate, right? And then lean into other folks, the media, your large corporations, of course, your entrepreneurs out in the community, the advisors and mentors, different accelerators. Of course, everything happening here at Point, but also nearby communities, showing up there. Cruising around Wisconsin, going to Starting Block, hitting one MC Midwest and presenting there. Yes, it requires that extra gear, but it unlocks so much opportunity when you understand these different elements throughout an entrepreneurial ecosystem. I was driving one day and I was like, man, life is great. It feels good right now. And it was like this moment of career nirvana. It was like this balance, right? I had things jamming on work and family felt solid and community was vibrant. This is a state that awaits like a lot of different paths towards this vibe, and it's a fleeting thing. It's not a solid state. But entrepreneurship is a pretty interesting path toward this experience. And Naval is another interesting philosopher. He's a modern guy, co-founder of AngelList, has a wonderful book in the back of your resource section called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. A little bit more like life, happiness, philosophy flavored versus hardcore business or startup activity. But I love the way he articulates being retired. It's like you've got the path that the financial advisor will always talk about, making sure you've got the financial capital to extend the runway of how long you might live and maybe some extra for those you care about. There's another path of like becoming a monk and not needing anything. That's an option. But there's another option where money doesn't matter. You're like doing things you love, doing things you care about, and it's an interesting balance when you find things that look like work to others, but feel like play to you. Your parents want you to find something that's stable, maybe it's making some money along the way. You want to do something that you care about, and so how can you find things that are right in between here? It creates like an interesting sustainability when you find things that feel this way. And it might not be the first idea. Be willing to pivot, and it might be a side hustle that unlocks like that experience so that you can maybe feel the grind of something else that's not as fun now, but it's giving you the resources, adding new real skills, building your engaged network so that you can go and continue to pursue more things that you're intrigued by. And so it's an interesting state. You hear the word grind in the entrepreneurial lifestyle all the time, but I might suggest it's more of a dance. This is something that can feel like this. And I promise, if you are out there building something that you care about, the resiliency will lead to persistence, activating the wild card, and it's available to you now. I'm here to give you the permission, if that was something you felt was required, in order to turn some knobs, explore some early moves, connect a couple of dots, go into the community, feel what that means, and actually start to commercialize ideas into reality. When you do this, it's one of life's greatest gifts. I mean, I think most of us want to pursue a state of peace, perhaps a little of purpose along the way. And if you are building things that you truly care about, I could go now. I've lived my lives. That's an interesting place to be, and I promise it's accessible to all. Lastly, this is a quick moment of gratitude. Kevin, all the UW Sentry Point folks that I've met throughout the last 24 hours, Elizabeth, thank you to everyone who connected the dots. They were generous enough to cover the cost to get those books into your hands and to extend the impact that we can continue to make together. I'm not going anywhere, and so I like to do this. I've written what you see in that book over 6,000 times, but it's a neat mantra of just pure optimism. May the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows. Keep building!